Lots going on at Capitol Hill today, where the Republicans are going to decide whether or not to keep Liz Cheney around as part of the leadership team. And one of the guys who may have a say in that in the long run is Congressman Lloyd Smucker, one of our local congressmen from the 11th Congressional District. He joins us here this morning on WSBA. Good morning, Congressman. How are you?
Good morning, Gary. Always good to be with you.
Always an honor to have you aboard. And, I saw where Liz Cheney said Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. That's one of the things that's kind of gotten her into a situation where many are saying, well, we want to get her out of a leadership position there because we want people who from the Republican Party who are going to be supporting their agenda. What's your take on her whole situation right now and where Republicans are feeling in the House of Representatives about her continuing on?
Well, Liz Cheney will be removed as the chair of the Republican Conference. We have a meeting at 9 o'clock this morning. We regularly, every 2 years, make a decision about who we feel would be best to lead the conference and work with the other members of the leadership team, the majority leader, the whip, the speaker when we are in the majority. Maybe I talk about it in this way. I was a business owner for years. We had several hundred employees in the company that I owned, and
Right.
hired a lot of people, put together a leadership team. And when you're looking for the qualities of a leader, and by the way, I think leadership is earned, and I like to think of it as servant leadership. It's really, really important to be able to have a cohesive leadership team that is able to not only work together as a group, but also move the entire team forward.
Right.
And that's the reason for this vote today. It's not. She obviously was in the minority with the conference in voting for impeachment, but there were other members as well. There were 10 members of our conference who voted for impeachment, who have moved beyond that and who are working together with other members of conference to push back on this radical agenda that we're seeing implemented by the president and progressives in Congress. We've got to stop this march towards socialism that we're seeing. And unfortunately, in Liz's case, and she's a good friend of mine, came in with me, was elected at the same time I was. And unfortunately, in her case, she keeps relitigating the past. And that's just a detraction from moving forward, from advancing the agenda that we all believe is important, the idea of limited government, of freedom, less taxes, and allowing every American to live their own American dream.
Yeah.
And so this is the reason for this vote this morning. We have to stay together. We are together as a Republican Party, by the way.
Right. Well, and
we're solely focused on defeating this agenda.
I was listening to her and the other day, and she said, Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. I mean, that's pretty stark words. And basically, and that's part of the relitigating you're talking about. But by the same token, she's saying, hey, my Republican Party that I see from her vantage point, and I'm not defending her or anything else, I'm just making an observation, my Republican Party shouldn't be supporting Donald Trump, is in essence what she's saying. And the Republican Party, by ousting her today, is basically saying, hey, Donald Trump is here. He's still part of the leadership. Is the Republican Party in a bad place right now in terms of how they take on the policies and the personality of a Donald Trump? Your thoughts about that, Congressman?
We hear all this about the Republican Party being divided and about the divisions within the party, the fights within the party. I think, and I don't know your thoughts on this, but I think we're remarkably united. And when I'm talking the Republican Party, I'm talking about Republicans throughout the country, the American people, the Republicans. I'm not talking about several hundred members of Congress, but even several hundred members of Congress. We're remarkably united in the principles that we stand for as a party. And I see that in the district that I represent. Republicans are still very united. We are very proud of what we were able to accomplish with President Trump as president. And I think he taught us and moved the party to a party that included everyday working Americans. who moved to the Republican Party because we were advancing principles that made a difference in their lives.
I guess what I'm asking,
new jobs.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking you, is Trump there by choice, or is he there by, you're stuck with him? I mean, that's kind of what I'm asking, because a lot of us said, yeah, we love some of the principles and the policies that were put out there. I was one of those. On the other hand, I was also one of those who said, but I don't like the fact that the president seems to put his own personality ahead of that a lot of times and get in his own way in terms of execution of some of those policies, which I thought were pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, there are individuals within the party who, unfortunately, could not vote for the president in this last cycle because of the way he conducted himself. For instance, in my district, I received 17,000 more votes than President Trump.
Right.
And that's because of what he tweeted, because of the way he talked. It's not the way I was raised.
Right.
To talk about people in the way he did sometimes. But the fact of the matter is, as Republicans, we believe in Republican values. We believe in what we got done while he was here. But I think we need to come back and remind Republicans that we're not just a party of one individual.
Right. Great
He
statement.
certainly has had an impact on the party. I think will continue to have an impact on the party. It's going to be engaged and be helpful. In the midterm elections, we're focused on doing everything we can to stop the agenda by taking back the majority in the House, maybe even in the Senate. And I think the president President Trump, the former president, will be helpful with that. But we have to remind ourselves what we stand for, and we are not just a party of one individual.
Right. I agree with you. Jump to something else here. 266,000 jobs was not what the expectations of the experts was on Friday when the jobs report came out. 1 million was the expectation, yet 266,000 showed up. It was not a surprise to many of us because a lot of us felt that all this money that's coming out to people right now, which is going to last at least through September, is getting in the way of people going back to work. In this segment, I have about 40 seconds left. I hope we can keep you around for a second segment because I wanted to ask you about your border trip. Your thoughts about that number that came out on Friday?
Well, I think people respond rationally to incentives. And when you're paying people more to sit at home or to not report back to work, there are going to be people who take up that offer. And it's awful to put someone in that position. If you're providing for your family, you're putting food on the table, and you make it harder to do so by going back to work, that's terrible policy. And what the Democrat Party is doing right now is incentivizing dependency on federal government and disincentivizing work. It's terrible policy.
This morning is Congressman Lloyd Smucker, who took a trip down there on April 8th, in fact, as part of the Republican Study Committee to study what's going on, and he could see what's happening at the border. Lloyd, from your vantage point, what was happening at the border? Were the right policies being enacted or not? Your thoughts?
No, what we're seeing at the border, Gary, is an unmitigated disaster. It is a direct result of the president's policies that he instituted through executive order shortly after taking office, reversing some of the policies that President Trump had put in place to stem the tide of people coming across. He has created a system of human trafficking where the Mexican cartels are benefiting financially, a massive financial benefit where we are seeing many people come across basically being human trafficked and then placed into a situation of indentured servitude. We are seeing a massive increase in the amount of drugs coming across the border and in criminals coming across the border.
Right.
It's a disaster.
You know, when you look at what's happening right now in the country, of course, the president has talked about infrastructure, but infrastructure, the definition that I knew at one time, has certainly expanded to a new type of infrastructure. It looks like an omnibus bill for everything we want to try to get through here on an agenda item. Am I seeing things the wrong way?
No, you're seeing that exactly right. Less than 6% of this $2 trillion so-called infrastructure package that the president's proposing is for what we typically refer to as infrastructure, which is roads and bridges. There's additional for mass transit, rail, waterways, but all that put together is just a fraction of the total spend. And they now, I think, call it human infrastructure or family infrastructure. $400 billion of this, that's a significant portion of the bill, would be for the expansion of Medicaid, 200-some billion for increasing federal control of local housing markets, $100 billion for schools without requiring them to reopen, and on and on and on. And it's very similar to what was the so-called COVID relief bill, where only 9% of that bill went to directly impacting and defeating the virus. Again, $6 trillion proposed. If the president gets all he wants, if the Democrats get all they want, they would spend about $10 trillion in their first year of office.
It's incredible.
This will have a dramatic impact. We're already starting to see it with inflation going up, and it absolutely cannot be funded by just taxing the wealthy, as they like to say. I mean, this will hit the pocketbooks of every American, both in increased taxes but also in inflation. You just simply cannot continue to print money and expanding the money supply in this way without seeing an impact on inflation.
We're talking with Congressman Lloyd Smucker this morning from the 11th Congressional District. You were a business owner, as you mentioned, before you became a legislator and then a congressman. And one of the things that we've been talking about a lot, and I know you're talking about it in Washington, the minimum wage. President Biden has kind of hung his hat on the minimum wage and trying to get it to $15 an hour. I guess the argument that we're having, and I would want to know this from your standpoint as a guy who started a small business and then built into a relatively large business, does minimum wage hurt the small business owner or not? We have a lot of people say it does not. And of course, President Biden said the other day, hey, raise your prices to get some of these people back to work now and so forth. It's not just that easy for small business owners, but minimum wage, good or bad for small business owners in this country, raising it to $15 an hour. Your thoughts about that? About a minute and a half left.
Well, we want every American worker, every family to have a family-sustaining job, have a career that provides that allows them to support their families. I was very proud in the business I owned to create hundreds of jobs doing that. If you go to my previous company now, it's still in business, you're probably starting at $16 an hour or something like that with no experience. The market does that. The problem I have with the minimum wage is, one of the best indicators of someone's success in later life is whether they worked during high school, whether they had a job. And these are often jobs. My son is 18. He worked at a job that started at minimum wage. He was thrilled with that. And as I said, it helped him to understand work ethic, how to, necessary to show up on time and be there when expected. These are all skills that we want young people to develop. And the fact of the matter is, if you increase the minimum wage too much, those jobs potentially could go away, and that's bad. These minimum wage jobs, most of the jobs that are out there right now, aren't what you would, they're not someone their entire career is working on those jobs.
Right.
These are generally entry level jobs, and you move on from there. And so, my preference is to allow the market to dictate the wage. And it already is. Most jobs today are way above the starting wage for most jobs, are way above the current minimum wage.
Congressman, really appreciate you taking the time this morning to go around a breadth of topics with us. Always good to talk to you each month, and we look forward to next month with you. In the meantime, be safe and do well.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.